Here we go, all 32 pod. Once again, Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson alongside. We are taping this on Thursday, late afternoon, prior to the Thursday night football game. So much going on, Will. A reminder to everyone, show brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. And Game Time, best tickets, best prices to get you in anywhere, anytime, any event. We got a lot to get to. Let's get right to it. We ended the show, or certainly discussed on our last show, the potential suspension for Azeez Al-Shaair. Pretty much after we did that, word comes out it's a 3-game suspension for that dirty hit on Trevor Lawrence. However, it has sparked quite the reaction, and not only internally with the Texans, which of course you expect, that's their guy, right? He's one of their captains, but also on the national landscape, including one guy by the name of Tom Brady who thinks that quarterbacks aren't doing a good enough job protecting themselves. Where do you stand on where you were the first one? You kind of like, hey, this is going to be multiple games. It should be multiple games.
Yeah, I think I said 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I said somewhere between 4 and 6 because I felt like we saw, we've seen this before in the past. Like we've seen Eddie Jackson got 4 games for, I think, two weeks of personal fouls. They weren't even ejectable hits, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back. So not surprised that he got multiple games. I'm not surprised that the NFL had to send a message here at some point because, as I mentioned, it's not even that I'm suggesting teams do this. It's more of it's a fact of life. We saw Dan Campbell have a full conversation with the refs pre-Thanksgiving game that Caleb Williams likes to do. He's watched Mahomes. He likes to do what Mahomes does, which is, by the way, this is a lot of Mahomes' fault and Josh Allen and these quarterbacks
For sure.
do it that have not gotten penalized. I mean, the Kenny Pickett famous slide in college. But at the end of the day, if you don't penalize Al-Shaair here, and they don't send a message that you're going to get probably more than – look, I don't know that he needed to get suspended for 3 games. In reality, it's football, and I get it. But, again, if you don't send a message, who's to say that tomorrow night or tonight when we watch this game that Jordan Love goes and scrambles and slides and the Lions say, we might be down a linebacker, but let's send a message, our rivals. And if Jordan Love gets hurt, we don't want him to get hurt, but we're going to send a message. You start getting into a lot of, I know it feels like it's being dramatic, but you start to get into that Spygate, not the Spygate, the 2009 Saints stuff. Yeah. And it's not saying that it's going to go to that level, but if you don't nip it in the butt now, it's going to become that. And yes, there's far worse hits that we've seen in the NFL. There will be far worse hits. Tom Brady, the Nate Clemens hits, one of the most famous clips you still watch on, you'll go on Twitter or X or, YouTube, whatever, and you search Tom Brady big hit and you see the Nate Clemens hit and his helmet flies off and Brady gets up. Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate Tom's insight. That was 25 years ago. The NFL was way different 25 years ago. This is the current NFL. Trevor Lawrence is sitting in a fencing posture, unconscious. And I thought the craziest part of this entire thing, I think, was people were mad from the Texans side of things that the Jaguars reacted, which to me was insane. And if CJ Stroud got hit like that and the Texans didn't react, we'd call them soft. We would have been ripping the Jags, ripping Doug Peterson, ripping everyone in that locker room. And we didn't, because that's what you should do when your quarterback gets hit. You heard Jeff Saturday on ESPN. I thought he put it perfectly. Him and Shannon Sharp were like, what did you want them to do? And you mentioned it yourself. He got himself tossed out of the game, probably for the better. And the last thing I'll say on this is we don't have to do this. John Runyon was a dirty player, and that
was so dumb. Come on, the people like Kyle Long, like immediately, like, oh, and it was like, you've been holding on this forever. Who cares what he was as a player?
Cares?
They put him in charge of discipline. There are rules to follow. The guy broke the rules.
It is what it is. And lastly, I would say, like, a lot of the Ryan Clarks and the Tom Brady's and these guys played the game at the highest level, extremely successful, really good at their jobs on TV and doing different things. I don't know. Ryan kind of made a living off of dirty hits. So like, I'm not really sure that I get it. It's like, oh, this wouldn't have been dirty in my day. Well, it's not your day anymore, unfortunately. Right. And the NFL is different. Al-Shaair's apology was BS. I thought it was, crafted by ChatGPT in a notes app. And then he comes out and he posted like the 4th coolest Joker meme. And he does the whole, his cleats and the whole thing. Like, even it's your 5th offense of something that was crossing the line. We didn't even talk about the Derek Carr forearm shiver he hit to Derek Carr that no one even talked about. So again, we're probably talking too much about this. I just think that it is what it is. He'll come back in 3 games. He's going to be watched heavily. Someone's still going to slide late this weekend or next weekend. We're probably going to get a repeated thing. And it's going to be like, well, now there's a barometer. 3 games is what you're going to get if you're a repeat offender who takes out a quarterback. It is what it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. He's appealing that if it gets knocked down to 2 games, but
appealing's already back. 3 games done.
Yeah,
it is.
It's
they
done.
Said nope.
Yeah, good. So there you go. There it is. It's locked down. I think a lot of people were tone deaf, and the Brady thing. He missed the mark on the Daniel Jones thing as well. He went on this rant about Daniel Jones. How dare they invested in you? You ask out of that team, dude. They sat him on the bench permanently, or were going to permanently, because he had an injury clause in his contract. They didn't want him to get hurt, so they didn't have to pay him $23 million if he got hurt. So shut up. They were doing to save their own skin. I don't know. Look, you're in the media, you talk for a living. There are going to be some takes that are wrong. There are going to be takes that you look back on, maybe even the day after you did it, hour after you did it, and go, you know what? Maybe I didn't think that one is through. Maybe that's not as sound an argument as I'd like to make, but I just get off the stupid, in my day thing and just, I don't know. Foolish.
I thought Jason McCourty did the best thing you could possibly do today when you make a mistake. He made a mistake and said, the Bills would need to host the Chiefs in order to try to win. He's like, I honestly just was talking on a million different shows and got confused for a second. That's on me. My bad. I totally messed that up. It happens. If Tom was smart, in my opinion, he would watch a lot of Mark Sanchez and a lot of Greg Olsen this offseason and how they kind of approach the game as guys that are not the superstar names, but they bring this insight where they don't. Him and Romo, I think, would do better in my opinion, to trend a little bit more towards where Mark and Greg are in terms of this, kind of that balance of analytics and trying to think what the coaches are doing and talk to the football fan as if they're pretty smart, but not a genius. Because talking to people you don't know what they're talking about, I think people have caught on. Anyone has access to all 22 now and these different stats. You got to kind of show folks, in a quick time frame, what these things mean and how they impact the game.
Yeah, there has to be personality. He's just very stiff at this point. So that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Let's get to, I guess it's the game of the week. There's a couple of them, not an awesome slate this week. Chargers at 8-4 visit the 11-1 Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. I'm fascinated for a lot of reasons. The second meeting of these two teams, KC won the first one 17-10. Chargers actually led 10-0 late in the second quarter. Kansas City, as they've done all year, have found a way to win that game. But the Chargers have now won 5 of 6. There was the one slip up against the Ravens, but it was a competitive game. They still bring the number 1 scoring defense in the league, averaging less than 16 points per game against the Chiefs team that, again, we're still talking about this here in the first week of December. Their offense, I don't even want to say that hasn't hit its stride. I think this is what their offense is, and maybe there'll be some variance. Maybe they'll just, Pat has one of those days where he's just completely on fire, or Kelsey, has the cayenne pepper water and just goes bananas himself. But by and large, this is who they are. And I think the way the Chargers are playing, they have a chance in this ball game to knock off KC.
Doesn't this just feel like the Chargers are going to be in a lot of ways what the Rams are, where they're at home? It's nice to play inside. It's nice to kind of play in that familiar setting. And yeah, it's not that I don't want to do the whole they don't have fans thing. I think that's extremely insulting. They don't have the same fan base following at this moment in their home stadium that some of these other, they have large fan bases. They've moved locations. This is what happens.
Yeah.
But I feel like they've kind of embraced that Harbaugh, we will play you anywhere. It's going to be a rock fight. I feel like they're going to learn a little bit from how they played against Baltimore. They got banged up pretty bad in that game, it felt like, and the Ravens had a nice night on them. They just did it. Kind of the talent took over, right? That's something that we've talked about with the Chargers all year, is there's talent there. I think we both thought, I had them as a 9 or 10 win team that was going to sneak in as the 7 seed, if I'm not mistaken. I thought they'd be very competitive and much better. I don't think I thought they were going to be potentially an 11, 12, 13 win team, but yeah, I want to see if some team can take advantage of Kansas City at this point. We've seen Buffalo Buffalo did it, but that was a matchup where even if Kansas City played well, Buffalo could have beat them, right? That's how well they're playing. As you mentioned, Chargers 5 out of 6. Can Herbert? I'd like to see Herbert have a multi-touchdown game here. I feel like he's done such a good job. I believe he still has the 1 interception. He's run the ball a lot better this year. super effective. And like, it's just not slighting him at all. I think he is a top 5 quarterback in the league. But if you wanted to be critical of Herbert, the two things would obviously be, late season success. And the weird thing this year is like, look at the other, the top 5 guys you'd consider. Mahomes in a down year, I believe, has 19 touchdowns. Burrow's at 30 or so. 30. Allen's way up there. Lamar is obviously a guy who, if Lamar and the Bills were flipped, kind of like they were last year, like you'd be talking about Lamar winning a 3rd MVP. You probably have more MVPs than playoff wins at this point. So I'd like to see Herbert kind of go from that super athletic, awesome game manager type. I know that's a triggering word for some folks, but I actually think that's the way they've wanted to have him play football this year. I'd like to see maybe, can he take over this game and have 2 touchdowns passing, 40 yards rushing, and they win 23-20 in Kansas City. And it's like, oh, okay, wow. Okay. And like, can Cameron Dicker make a few kicks? And we saw last week, the tackle spots are rough in Kansas City. That's the one thing. It's just funny, Mike, because I think a lot of the things we went into the year in our previews, there's some things we definitely got wrong. But with Kansas City, we were like, the defense is really good. The quarterback's all world, obviously. The running game's good. We were a little worried about the weapons in terms of age. And I don't know. DeAndre Hopkins draws a lot of flags, but man, he doesn't move like he used to move. And neither does Kelsey, obviously, but they still have their moments. They're beatable, and the tackle spots are bad. If the Chargers, can you get Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack going one time? This feels like a playoff game. And because if KC loses, Buffalo controls their own destiny as the 1 seed. And that would be obviously pretty damn big deal going into what will be week 14 here, whatever it is. We're getting down to the wire here.
Yeah. It's interesting. You brought up Herbert, and I think he is playing really well this year. I think he's playing better than he has in a couple of years, but it feels like there's still another level to get to. This is an interesting matchup for him because KC plays a ton of man. I think they're top 5 in the league in terms of how they deploy man defenses under Spags. Herbert has not been great against man at all this year, 46.1% completion percentage. Now, look, there's a lot that goes into that. A big part of being the receivers that can't beat man. They're really limited at that position. And Ladd McConkey, again, as we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, limited participant on Wednesday, dealing with both the knee and the shoulder. The knee is appears to be the bigger thing. He's been playing with the shoulder for some time, so that'll be crucial because he's been their go-to guy as a rookie already. But I'm curious to see how they defend him and if he can elevate in that big spot. And
will Quinn Johnson catch the football?
Wow, geez, good Lord. I mean, first-round pick, man. I was just doing a big thing on for Boston Sports Journal for my notes column about Jalen Polk's having a rough year for the Patriots, and if guys don't pop early, do they not pop at all? And the evidence is pretty damning for wide receivers. I basically cut it off at around from the 20th pick of the draft in the first round through the second round because I think there's a variance of how people view or what they need in the second round of receiver. But Johnson was a first-round guy and has not been at all what they needed him to be. And if he had been, now you're talking, because then with McConkey underneath and him on the outside, instead it's McConkey and Will Dissly have been the 2 guys. One other thing,
feel like you're maybe one weapon away next year. You'd feel like now you kind of feel like you're 2, unfortunately, and maybe it's a draft and sign and trade for 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, considering how they sort of reset their books, if maybe they're a team that sort of gets into the T. Higgins conversation, because we know T's going to have a lot of people interested in him and make a lot of money. Last thing in the Chargers, no J.K. Dobbins last week. He's on IR. Last week without him. They really struggle to run the football without him. They average 4.8 yards per carry when he's on the field, 3.2 when he's off. Gus Edwards, probably the primary ball carrier, and the Gus bus has not gotten going just yet. KC has been pretty good against the run. Let's go to, you mentioned the Bills and potentially controlling their own destiny if Kansas City gets knocked off here. The Bills at 10-2. It's an easy game for them. They've got to go to LA. They got to play the Rams. 6-6 Rams. The Rams still trying to hang on, just a game out of the lead in the NFC West, but would lose some of the head-to-head tiebreakers, at least at this point, with Seattle as the first-place team. I think it's a terrific test for the Bills. Their defense in particular, because I'm really curious to see how they deal with Nakua and Kupp. And now Kupp is a little bit beat up. I mean, Nakuma's always beat up. They're both always beat up, but he's shown a little bit of signs of age. But they love to play zone about as much as anybody. But against the Chiefs earlier this year, when they looked at the Chiefs' weapons and said, you know what? These guys can't run away from us. Let's play man. And that was a big shock for Kansas City, and they did a really good job in that game. And it was, I think, part of the story of why they won the game. I'm curious if they go into this thing and look at particularly Kupp and say, I know there's a lot of motion. There's a lot of bunch formations that can make it challenging and man-to-man and picks and all those things. But, like, these guys aren't going to run away from our corners. And maybe they once again show a little bit more confidence in the corners to play more man, and how the Rams sort of deal with that. And McVay's really smart, but like Andy Reid's pretty smart too. And they had a hard time figuring out, because just at the end of the day, I don't have enough juice on the outside to beat you. And I'm curious if the Bills sort of approach this the same way.
Yeah, a couple of different things will be interesting to see. Just from a defensive perspective for the Rams, I feel like the Rams have had easily the hardest schedule in the league. I have no evidence to tell you that that's the case. Detroit would
Right.
probably argue they have, but I swear every week the Rams are in an absolute dogfight. Their easiest game was at New England. That's not
Wasn't easy at all, right?
Or the Jets have coming. That's not an easy place to go, West Coast to East Coast, for a 1:00 kickoff off. I believe they played, a Monday night game the week before. It's not a. They've just had an insane schedule, and it's just something I probably should have picked up on before the season. In terms of how they defend the Bills, it'll be interesting to see, because it feels like right now the Bills they're the best front running team in the NFL, and I don't mean that in a bad way per se, but very 2017 Cavs ish. The Cavs obviously ended up losing to the Warriors in that finals, but it felt like if they got up. They started playing well early, it was over. They just kill you off. There was no way. Same that the 2017 Warriors, frankly, from that perspective. Once the ball started going and they start making threes, it's over. And the Bills are making their threes, and Josh Allen is playing the way he's playing. It's hard to keep pace with them, no matter their defense. You mentioned how the Bills will defend them. This has to be a big Kyren Williams game. Really cool moment, obviously, with Steven Jackson. He had his foundation. That was awesome. And what are the odds that ends up happening? He ends up as a Ram in the 5th round, and Steven Jackson's giving him his cleats. And I think that's as cool as it gets in sports.
Quickly, just for those who didn't see it, you can check it out online. But Kyren Williams, he is the Rams nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. Many years ago, when he was a kid, Steven Jackson, who previously represented the Rams, is the Walter Payton Man of the Year award nominee. There's a picture of the two of them together. Kyren wanted his gold cleats, couldn't get his gold cleats. It went over his head. I presented him with the gold cleats while announcing that he was their nominee for Man of the Year. So it's pretty cool moment. A lot of, it's funny, we get into the X's and O's. We talk about Shaair and the dumb hit and all these different things. There's a lot of stuff that happens off the field that these guys do that is phenomenal. That gets cool. Under-publicized. And that's really cool. Just sort of like a full 360 moment, or whatever you want to call it, full circle moment that he was able to have that.
Steven Jackson probably could still play. That dude is,
oh my God, he's a house. He's freaking jacked.
He's a beast. Dreads or no dreads.
I'll never forget the Steven Jackson. Patriots signed him late in the year, and then went into Miami, and we're like, we're not going to throw the ball. We're going to try to establish the run, and we're going to run the ball. And I think he had 15 carries for 30 yards. They lost the game, and that's a sign of a bad thing to come for that team. But go ahead.
Yeah, I would say in terms of what they're going to do here, this has to be a big Kyren Williams game in terms of Matt Milano's only second game back. I feel like just watching some of the tape, I know the weather was a factor, the injuries were a factor, but I felt like as much as they blew out San Francisco, there was yards to be had for that offense. And I felt like McCaffrey was starting to get going. We saw that on that drive where he ends up getting hurt. I feel like Purdy and Kittle, kind of Jennings, weren't just on the same page all week. Obviously, Purdy coming back. The Rams should be able to score here in this game. And you just wonder, Buffalo coming off. Look, Buffalo could easily go and win this game by 10 points, and we wouldn't think twice. That's the way they're playing right now. They got Detroit next week in prime time. They were just in prime time, the fun snow game. Everyone's talking 1 seed, Allen MVP, the whole 9 yards. And the little old Rams, who are a team that I still don't think anyone really wants to play this team. And the more they play, frankly, the better they get. A lot of these young guys on defense, especially Fisk, Verse, et cetera, Young, all these guys in the last 2 draft classes. I'm not saying the Rams win this game, but if you look up and it's like 26-21 with 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and the Bills have the ball and you're like, oh, how are the Rams up here? It's like the Rams are 6-6, but should probably be 8-4-ish at the moment. And as good as the Bills are, when you sandwich primetime games like that and you have to go fly out to the West Coast knowing, oh, we got Detroit Super Bowl matchup, here we go. You tell me that I know they like one game at a time. That's BS.
Yeah.
You know that everyone's talking about this is going to be the game of the year. And I think for both Detroit and Buffalo this week, you better be careful because Buffalo loses, the one seed's basically gone. And you've done all this work to make up ground, and you did. And if you're Detroit, you better not mess around because you literally are a half game up in first place, and you might go from the 1 to the 5 seed real quick. So as good as both teams are playing, this game's big for the Rams, but I think it's almost bigger for Buffalo just because of the aspirations right now are Super Bowl or bust. It's not just get in the playoffs and try to win a game, make some noise.
Well, normally I would say this is a really bad spot for them because of what you mentioned. The big game against San Francisco got all the spotlight, all the attention, Lions looming. But I would say because of what is at stake now in the AFC, because you beat Kansas City head-to-head, that if this team is what they think they are and what you may think they are on the outside, then this is a pretty good carrot to hold in front of them if you're Sean McDermott and say, look, man, you can't let up. Like, this is a good team we're playing. Don't look at Detroit because you lose this game and then we're back to like, well, I guess we're going to have to go through KC unless something happens with KC going forward. And that's not where you want to be because they've been there before and it hasn't worked for them. Let's hear from Prize Picks and a big announcement from Prize Picks for next week. And we'll have our picks later in the program. Is the best place to get real money sports action. Over 10 million members, billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players and up to 6 for your shot to win up to 100 times your cash. And it's one of those things you go into and say, hey, like, do I think Jalen Hurts is going to go off this week? Now, let me look at the numbers. Do I go more? Do I go less? Saquon Barkley pretty much, it seems like whatever the more or less is in rushing yards, feels like recently you just want to take more because he's capable of doing that. Got a great deal for you here at CLNS. You just download the app, which is important. Use the code CLNS. You get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, you don't even have to win with the $5. You're still getting $50. So just download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off. Prize Picks, baby. Run your game. Last game before we get into a little mock draft season. Seahawks at 7-5. Visit the 6-6 Arizona Cardinals. Seahawks beat Arizona in Week 12. The Hawks are rolling right now, 3-0 since the bye. Cardinals 0-2 since their bye. And if Seattle wins this, again, because they're so tightly packed, you can't say that the division is theirs. But boy, they put a real stranglehold on it. And probably, Arizona would have to need a lot of things to happen down the stretch. And remember, just a couple weeks ago, they were the ones sitting in first place in the NFC West, as all these teams are pretty well clustered. I look at this, I talk about desperation. Desperate team has to be the Cards here, right? Like, Seattle's rolling. It's a lot at stake here, but they still have the tiebreaker, the head-to-head stuff. Arizona, this is essentially their season here.
Yeah, a couple things in this game that stand out. Seattle's going to stop beating themselves. I feel like all year they've turned it around. They've got some luck go their way. They've had some unlucky moments. I thought the Rams game was Seattle beating themselves and things of that. They had no business beating the Jets last week. And that's not about, should have been 28-7. It was a great play by Leonard Williams. He's playing fantastic football and the defense was able to figure it out. Gino made plays when he needed to, but like a lot of bailout flags, whether they're right or not, they just got bailed out with the Jets beat themselves. That's what bad teams do. And the Jets did that. But special teams, I'm watching that this week because frankly, I'm not sure I've seen a worse special teams game from a team in like a really long time than I watched on Sunday afternoon. They almost fumbled 3 kickoffs or punts, blocked kicks, kickoff return allowed for a touchdown. That cannot happen. You just wonder with Arizona, since that Jets game, they had a couple big blowouts. They won the crazy San Francisco game, obviously on the road, but they blew out the Rams, they blew out the Jets at home in games that kind of were over from snap one. But they've also, I don't know, that they kind of fade a lot. It feels like it's a lot of Kyler Murray's career, unfortunately, so far in the NFL. It's like these fast starts, and then the Bills game, you think of week 1, they were up 28-14 in the third quarter and like just totally blew it. He started to have some of those bad turnovers again. They blew the one to Minnesota, and it ends up in, they had the multiple turnovers. The one down the left sideline was like, what are you doing? I just wonder with Arizona, is this more of who they are, which is a young team with some good foundational pieces. They're pretty well coached. I think the coaching was a little exaggerated, but they're pretty well coached, for sure. Not that Gannon and Petzing are not, good coaches. I don't think they're the McVay Shanahan level in the division even, but good team. I think building blocks, they still feel a year away. And maybe I'm wrong and they win this game and the Rams lose and all of a sudden the Cards are right back in it, right? Like that really could happen. They just feel like they kind of feel like they're trending towards like 8-9, 9-8, where it's like, oh, they're going to be a really fun, trendy pick if they have a nice offseason. And that's fine. I feel like Seattle's in this weird, they're kind of rounding into what you thought they were going to be in terms of it's not a great roster. It's a good roster. It's not a great coaching staff. It's a coaching staff on the rise that's good. They still throw the ball too much for me.
I feel like that's an offensive. I feel like it's an offensive line problem, and they had some injuries and have gotten some of those guys back. But it just feels like early in the year there were some moments with Kenneth Walker who was like one of the breakout candidates of the year. Right, everybody loved him. Take him in your fantasy draft, all that nonsense, and it just they're averaging 88 yards rushing per game, which when you consider sort of the hype that went into it, that they just haven't been consistent enough there.
Yeah, it felt like they were first and goal from the 1. They threw it 4 out of 5 times against the Jets, and they couldn't score. And it was like, dude, this is a light box. Run the football. What are you doing? Right. And they didn't. But I look at this game and I think to myself, if you're Seattle, you're looking around in the division going, San Francisco's a train wreck. Not the franchise. I mean, they're just their seasons. It's right. It is what it
Everybody's
is.
Beat up, as we talked about earlier in the week.
Then you're going, Rams are hosting Buffalo, and that might be a tough game, as I mentioned. But you're looking on paper, going, Buffalo's rolling. Hey, can we steal one here in Arizona? And all of a sudden, we're fully in control. We got to play the Rams again, and we got to play Niners. We feel pretty good about ourselves. I think I like Seattle in this game just because I don't love both quarterbacks, but I kind of like Gino's ability sometimes to he just makes some dumb decisions, but he also sometimes makes these throws. You're like, just wow. And I know Kyler's the same way. I don't know. I guess I just like Seattle. I think I like McDonald better than I like Gannon. And I just like the way the Seahawks defense is playing overall. They seem to be coming up these big time plays. I mean, Leonard Williams, Witherspoon, etc. Again, this game means a lot, though. It really does, because if you're Arizona, I don't know how you come back from, the way it's spiraled here. And then on top of that, you have 0 tiebreaker over Seattle, and you might not have the tiebreaker over the Rams or, San Francisco at the end of the day. It's not a great place to be in.
Yeah, that's why if I were a betting man, I'd probably kind of lean towards Arizona just out of sheer desperation. You were talking about how they put a lot on Gino because of the run game. This is fascinating to me because Arizona, I think, has sort of evolved into a defense that realizes they don't have enough horses. So they're blitzing a lot. They're bringing a lot of different pressures, just looking for turnovers, looking to, sort of confuse the quarterback.
Gino's
one of those guys. Yeah, Gino's one of those guys where he might, if he's on a heater, he might throw 4 touchdowns. There might be 2 70-yard touchdown bombs to DK and Jackson Smith and the Jigba. Or he doesn't see it coming, and he's 12 interceptions this year.
Well, that's what he did the last time they played them. He had those horrible interceptions against the Rams, too. It was like, dude, what are you doing? Last week, I feel like he did a good job of evading pressure at times and was able to hit some of those crossers. JSN does a fantastic job of hash to hash. He is so good in scramble rules, so good at finding those little pockets, and Gino and him have great chemistry. So they're going to have to lean on that because, again, they don't run the football well. And Arizona, frankly, doesn't give up a lot against the run anyway. So probably not your best bet of trying to beat them, especially not at home.
Definitely not. But it's going to be a fun game, I think, for sure. Let's hear now from Game Time. I just got an email as we're doing this thing. Pearl Jam North American concert tour this summer. I want tickets. How do I get tickets? I have an idea. Game Time brings you the goods. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I keep saying this, but it drives me nuts when you're on somebody else's site, which now you don't even bother with those anymore. And you have to like keep changing the parameters. Oh, they only have one ticket, but I said two. And now you got to reset and do the whole thing. Nah, Game Time takes care of that for you. Just download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Can create the account. Use the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. It's also time for mock draft season. One of our favorites, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, released his first mock draft of the year, December 3rd, December 2nd. Just did round one. He's not diving into the 3 rounds, 7 rounds as we end up doing as you get along here. And you have that little period of time where content is, you're looking for some content. But for me, before I ask you, what has jumped out, and I've sort of known it as we've gone along in the process and I've started to dig a little bit more into it. There's a lot of questions about this draft. It's leaning in a lot of places. When people start talking about maybe running back being the deepest position in the draft, man, maybe not a great year to be up top or looking for that franchise quarterback. Brugler pointed out Travis Hunter, the Colorado, the dual threat, likely Heisman winner, wide receiver corner, would be the only guy in his mind that would have been picked in the top 10 picks of last year's draft. And when I look at last year's draft, without even looking at the results this year, just again, looking at the names and how I felt about talking to people, how I felt about some of these players, he's absolutely right. There was I didn't have too many, we nitpick the quarterbacks, right? Well, this is, Jaden doesn't throw the ball over the middle and he's slight, and Drake May's footwork's a bit of a mess, but dude, those were the guys. We knew they were the guys. Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, it was all alt. It was just very easy. Okay, maybe J.C. Latham going that early, surprise some people, but he's an athletic freak at tackle. And you put him with Callahan, you think, all right, we're going to be great. But by and large, it was just that was really kind of easy. You weren't sure the order, but you kind of knew the guys that were going to be in the top group. This one is, once you get past Travis Hunter, who he mocked number 1 overall, and he did it based on the rank of the records right now. So the Jaguars would have the number 1 pick. After that, it's just you may think this guy's the second best player in the draft, or the best player at that position, and you need that position. But you could easily take these guys, put them in a bag, and we could be doing this a month from now, 2 months from now, and saying some guy that wasn't even in the first round is now crept into the top 15. I think it's that wide open this year. So just quickly, Travis Hunter, number 1, Vegas, Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami, the Giants, Shador Sanders, number 3, the Patriots, tackle, maybe guard, Will Campbell, number 4, the Panthers, Abdul Carter, the edge player from Penn State, and Jalen Walker, linebacker, edge to the Jets, also in the top 10. Just your thoughts on well, you know what? Let's just start there as you make the face and smile. Walker, 6'2", 245. Can he be an edge guy? Is he an off-the-ball linebacker? Just knowing what you know now today, December 5th, would you be happy if that was the player that they picked with their selection?
I'd have to know what team to run defensively because one thing, I look at this draft and I agree with you. I think players pick 8 through 30, throw it in a bag and shake it up and see what falls out, because it's going, not that there's not a ranking of players, and not that there's not a hierarchy, but based on the way teams may fall, based on the way positional needs and the quarterbacks being such a mess and all these different things, we're going to see tight ends go much higher than probably they traditionally would go. And we're going to see guys reach on safeties and running backs and things like that, because the game has changed, obviously, as we know, and the NFL is kind of moving back towards this, try to win a game 20-17, have your quarterback be able to evade pressure, but not turn the football over, run the football, line of scrimmage, the whole thing. We've gone back to that era. That's a real thing. And even look at the numbers. Burrow's having a historic season, and he's going to maybe throw for 40 touchdowns, right? If he has a really great last month, we're not so far removed from Mahomes going 5,550 and the whole thing. It's the truth. If the board had worked out the way it did, I have a few differences in the way I think I would. I don't think Vegas is going to pass on Shador. I think that it is like, if he's on the board and Vegas is picking, he will be in the black and gold. I mean,
he's the perfect Mark Davis selection.
He is, and he's pretty clearly something with the Raiders in his tweets. I mean, it's every time the Raiders win a game, it's all glory to God or whatever the tweet is, and it's not inconvenient. Look it up. It's every time they win. Working back to front from just that top six, if Mason Graham's on the board and you're the Jets, I think I'd rather. He's not a sexy pick. He's probably a guy that goes in the 10 to 15 range a year ago. So picking him at 6 as an interior defensive lineman, you go, is that a bit of a reach? But then you go think to yourself, let's just say this team does hire Mike Vrabel, or I don't know, it doesn't matter, or Brian Flores. It doesn't matter. Just go through whatever the name is. Hey, next year they're running out Jermaine, Will McDonald, Kyren Williams, and Mason Graham, and Quincy Williams and Jamie Sherwood as their front six. Now we're talking, wow, the upgrade from Mason Graham from Javon Kinlaw and Solomon Thomas is quite stark. Maybe this defensive line's back to being what we thought it was going to be going into the year. Does this make this defense back to what it was as a top 5 unit? The Jets do need help at edge because, again, Will McDonald's probably more of a 2-down guy. He's been awesome, 10 sacks. Only the third Jets player to have 10 sacks as a homegrown, edge since John Abraham. John Abraham, him and Bryce Huff. Back-to-back years after not getting it for 16 years. Hopefully Will McDonald doesn't walk to the Eagles in 3 years. But Jermaine coming off the Achilles, they'll lose Reddick. So there's some need there. Ted McMillan was the one that I thought fell further in this mock than I would have expected. I'm tempted to say the Patriots would have taken him at 4 there. I like Will Campbell. I'm not sure he's my tackle 1, and I'm not even sure he's a tackle. And I don't know that the Patriots can take a guy that's not necessarily a tackle at 4 overall. As much as this draft might be, a crapshoot, I don't know that people – I know they need offensive line help, but I'm tempted to say that when we get to the offseason, the Patriots going a lot of bodies and, free agency trade, all these different things, and then getting their own homegrown 1A, this guy is a beast. Drake can make it their 50-50 balls too, and he'll make plays after the catch. Guy feels more like the pick that would appease people. And then one other thing I want to say about Travis Hunter is it's going to be very interesting how these next 6 weeks unfold because I apologize. We're really getting down into it. But if it ends up being Vegas and the Giants 1-2, which I think there's a chance it could be. Now Mac Jones starting at Jacksonville, they're pretty damn bad. But let's just say it is the Giants in Vegas. What does the team at 3 do? That's what's going to be the real conversation for me. Hunter's clearly the best player in the draft. If you're the Patriots or the Jets or whatever, you're going, Gonzalez and Travis Hunter is our duo, or Sauce Gardner and Travis Hunter, or even in Jacksonville, you're like, wow, like Trevor Lawrence is number 1 receiver and number 1 corner. Or do you go, he's clearly the best player in the draft, and we could it's the one player in the draft we could probably get a boatload of picks for, because someone's going to come up and say, I need this. This is going to sell jerseys. This is going to sell tickets. Maybe the Jags want, I don't know. There's so many questions, but Mike, that to me is the bigger, like we usually see it for quarterbacks. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be talks around Ward and Shador, and someone will talk themselves into Quinn Ewers, and someone will talk themselves into Nussmeier, and whether Jalen Milroe, who there's rumors he may be staying in school and transferring. I don't know what I would recommend he does that, because I think he needs a lot of work. When you get a team to jump off sides and you throw the football away on a free play, that shows me you're not quite there yet. Great athlete. But I guess encompassing this whole point here is that, like, there's a bunch of edge guys. Is Genty going to go to the Cowboys at pick 9? Like, that just feels like it's going to happen.
Right.
Then we're going to, but I guess all encompassing is like the guy with the most value in this draft isn't a quarterback. And I think that's going to be so interesting to watch, because again, we always see, like, last year, the biggest thing coming out of that draft and Hard Knocks was New England held all the cards to the draft because we knew quarterback 1, 2. We didn't know about 3. There was Marvin. Was it going to be Alt? Was it going to be Maye, McCarthy, etc.? Patriots turned down a heck of a lot. And I'll phrase this question. I want to hear your one more thoughts on the mock draft. There was an interesting article in Sports Illustrated today what the Bengals should do with Jamar Chase. And do they follow the Chiefs model? And would the Patriots, as well as Washington, be teams that would give up? They believe they have the Patriots giving up 2, 3, a second, a third, and then a first and a fourth and 26 for Jamar Chase. If you're the Bengals, would you entertain it? Rebuild the roster with all these picks? If you're Washington, it was like a first, a second, and a fifth. Thoughts on the mock draft, and then thoughts on the idea of pulling the Tyreek Brett Veach situation. Hey, we have our quarterback. Do we build the roster with, is it Juan Soto or is it Bregman, Santander?
Right.
The same kind of example.
Yeah, what's plan B? So quarterbacks always drive the draft, right? And I think you went into this thing and, some people were like, Carson Beck should have come out last year and he would have been a top 10 pick. And like Carson Beck's had a really tough year. He's fallen out of the first round. Maybe he has a great circuit after the year's over and someone convinces themselves at the back end of the first round, like, I want the fifth year on this guy. We can sit him for a year. We'll get him right. You mentioned yours, don't love. Ward is exciting as hell, but like his flaws in his game. Shador is not a big dude. He's not super athletic. Like, it's funny when I looked at the thing and I saw that the Giants had him, in Dave's mock at 3. I'm like, man, not that they don't get weather out west. It's not like Colorado's, but like MetLife can be challenging. Northeast can be challenging.
Look at Rodgers, one of the best arms of all time. Played at Lambeau, and maybe you could argue that he might have been fibbing a little bit with the wind because he was being defensive. But Aaron Rodgers is one of the 2 or 3 most talented arms we've ever seen in football, and arm strength is still not a problem. And he's having some weird issues with MetLife. You got to have Sam Darnold's arm looks a little different in Minnesota in the dome than it did outside with the Jets. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. So that to me was like sort of like, you better be careful what you're thinking about.
Yeah, a little eyebrow raise, right?
Yeah, the Will Campbell thing. Like, I've talked about it. His we're about to head towards arm length season, which is very important for these tackles and some of these edge guys. And by and large, people think he's going to be average, maybe even below average for what you'd want at the position. There are people I've already talked to around the league who think he is a guard. There are some that are steadfast. Dude, he's played left tackle at LSU since he was a freshman. The dude can handle it. He's a really good athlete, really good on his feet, so he can make up for the lack of arm length with his overall athleticism. But you better be damn sure if you're picking a 4 and you're picking that guy, if you believe he's the best of the bunch, you better be sure he's the left tackle because he can't be a left guard.
Is Kelvin Banks out of Texas not more of a guy who you're like, he's my left tackle. That's my guy. He's
an interesting one because I'm getting mixed reports on him. A lot of people think he might be a guard. So like the kid from Minnesota who falls down a lot, he's in Dave's draft as well. I think he might have been the second tackle or third tackle off the board for him. Some people think he's the best, and I don't know that he moves well. He feels raw to me. He feels like him and Connor Williams in Texas feel like cheaper versions of Amarius Mims, who was a freak athlete, right? Like if I think those guys were in that draft, if the 3 guys I just mentioned, 4 guys we just mentioned were in this tackle draft, where are they going? They're going after Mims, right? Like all Latham, Mims, like maybe before Guyton.
Olu was a goddamn rock. Against Seattle, 42 pass rush snaps, 0 pressures allowed.
Olu's a good player. I know that there's been some revenge. If they drafted Bowers, like I get it, but like I don't know.
The Jets could draft Tyler Warren this year if they win enough games in the next 5, and I'd rather probably have Olu and Tyler Warren than
Brock Bowers and question marks.
Brock Bowers and a question mark at left tackle when you're going to go into a regime with a new coach, new GM, and probably new quarterback. So, what are your thoughts quickly on the Chase thing before we get to our prize picks?
It's a good question.
A, would you entertain it if you're Cincinnati? And B, how aggressive would you be if you're one of the teams with a guy and a rookie quarterback, albeit Washington, Chicago, New England?
I think we've seen
the path to do it, right?
Yeah, I think we've seen all 3 of those teams already sort of indicate that they're willing to be aggressive. And we know that with the Ayuk sweepstakes, right? Like the Patriots offered supposedly the most money and they agreed to terms. So Ayuk just didn't want to come here. And maybe that would have changed now if he sees Drake May. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you just don't want to play in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which I can understand. the Steelers were very much involved with the Ayuk thing. In fact, for the longest time, we thought he was steering it in that direction, and Washington has sniffed around as well. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for those teams to be involved. If I'm Cincinnati, though, the first thing I'm doing, and I don't know if Mike Brown would do this because he's Mike Brown, I go to Joe Burrow and I say, Joe, look, man, you had an awesome year. We've taken a step back. We can't afford both T and Jamar. And Jamar, for whatever reason, his feelings are hurt, and we can't come to some sort of agreement there. I promise you we're going to take a wide receiver. I promise you but we're getting all this stuff back. Can you handle that? Now, if I'm Joe, I say, hell no, don't give me one of them at least. Like, figure it out. And obviously, Chase is if he's not the best receiver in the league, he's the guy right behind Justin Jefferson. So I would have that conversation. I don't know that Mike will. And based on what they've shown us and what we were talking about, I think earlier this week or maybe last week, like I still think that they paid Joe, but it feels like they're still cheap. Hendrickson didn't get his thing. Higgins didn't get his thing. It just feels like I don't know, man.
If you're the Patriots, right? You let's just say they pick 4 overall for whatever I know they have more than just their initial picks. How much of this draft would you move for Chase? You'd move one in a heartbeat, no? Chase is 24 years old. Like Taven McGillan's going to be 20.
You know what's interesting about this? So again, we talked about the sort of the Ayuk interest and all these sorts of things and making calls on these guys. I always have still wondered about whether Robert Kraft would pony up the money. If you can have a cost-controlled wide receiver for 4 or 5 years versus we're going to give up all these assets and then pay him, but apparently they're willing to do that with Ayuk. So I give up the number 4 overall. I would try to push them on next year's number 1. I would give them a 2
so
and
maybe
a 3.
More similar to what was suggested, which would be a 2 and a 3, and then a 1 and a 4 in the year following, because you'd hope you'd be good enough in year 3.
Where it's in the late teens or in the 20s, and that doesn't hurt as much as picking 4. But again, with the draft not being as top heavy this year, maybe this is the year if you were really going to do that you'd give up 4. I guess I would have to ponder it more. But I guess my first inclination would be, I'd probably do it. I would probably do it.
I think I would too, because I know it's probably 1% chance they'd do it. But if I'm New England, I'm like, that's what I'm doing in this offseason. I'm calling all those teams that have those guys that are fringe, going to get paid. We're not going to call the Jets because the Jets not going to happen. But all those guys from that class, those 2 classes, and say, we're here. If you want to move them, we're interested because we have our quarterback, and that's where we're at.
Quickly before we do the picks and get out of here, would you, if you were Cincinnati, if you couldn't get a 1 this year, if you're doing what we're talking about, the 1 next year, the 2 and a 3 this year, would you do it?
So my inclinations to say no, but if you trusted your GM and your head coach enough, and you felt stable enough that you were in lockstep with your quarterback, your head coach, and your GM, that you were going to be patient about this thing for about 12 to 18 months, I'd seriously consider it, only from the aspect of you kind of need to start over anyways, right? You're in that bridge. Buffalo's going through it this year, and they're overachieving.
Yep.
We saw the Chiefs overachieve as well. Mahomes won an MVP. They went 14-3 after trading Tyreek, who was 4 years older. So I'd seriously consider, if I'm going to get 4 top 100 picks and I'm going to free up $35-ish million a year in cap space, and it's going to be more than that with the cap going up, it'll be a bigger percentage. And I trust I can fill out my defense, make sure my offensive line is going to give Joe good enough pieces. Can he retain T. Higgins and have 4 top 100 picks and maybe sign another guy to patchwork it? If Joe's good enough, you at least consider it. I don't know if I'd do it, but I'd at least consider it because of how good of a quarterback he is, that I think he could elevate those around him maybe better than, if you had the 12th best quarterback, you don't. If you have a top 3 guy, you can probably do it.
Yeah, Mahomes and Allen, they did it with that, and that would probably be part of the pitch to Joe.
Who's to say Joe couldn't do it? I think Joe could do it. Why not?
Yeah. I just don't know if I'm Joe, if I trust the owner. All right, let's get to our picks for prize picks. I've got 4 for you. I'll just rattle them off. I'm going to take red hot NFC Player of the Week, Offensive Player of the Week, Bucky Irving, more than 66.5 yards rushing. I'm going to say Patrick Mahomes goes less than the 242.5 yards passing in this game against the number one defense in the Chargers. I'm going to take, as I can't read my writing. Oh, yes. Brandon Aubrey, the kicker for Dallas. I was mentioning kickers. 47.5 yards, more than that on his long field goal of the game as they continue to struggle to score touchdowns, but can field goals. And Jerry Jeudy has been force-fed the football a ton and has delivered for Jameis Winston. That's going to continue, more than 3.5 receptions in the game.
My quick three here. I mentioned him before. Kyren Williams, more on his yardage. I believe this is the game that the Rams are just going to need. They're going to need 22 carries for 115 and a touchdown from Kyren to win this football game. More in terms of Jalen Waddle, in terms of anything you can get. And I say that because Sauce Gardner is going to likely not play, potentially will play, but hamstring injury, it seems like they're not going to risk it. And Sauce coming off the best game of his year, it's a real shame, which means DJ Reed's going to probably have to do more work on Tyreek Hill. Michael Carter's going to have to do more work in the run game because that's what the Dolphins do against the Jets, which means Jalen Waddle is likely going to be on potentially Quantez Stiggers, who's a fifth round rookie. And the Jets are obviously in a bit of a mess at the moment, as we know. I'm going to go one tonight. I'll throw out there if possible. I like all of what like the Packers have a potential to do here, and I like specifically Josh Jacobs. I say that because a lot of injuries on Detroit's side. We know that they've lost linebackers. They've lost talent all over their defense. This again feels like Detroit's been playing rough game after rough game. They went in there and beat the Lions and beat the Packers' ass a little bit. And they have that 10-day mini bye coming up, and they need it bad. Dan Campbell talked about it, and they got Buffalo coming in there in a week, and it's like you're not overlooking Green Bay, but they're 2.5 games behind you, and you can kind of feel like, they feel good about themselves, as they should. Mm-hmm. I just wonder, does Green Bay go in there and be like, you punched us in the mouth for 60 minutes 3 weeks ago in our building. We're going to come in there and try to punch you right in the mouth. And even if it doesn't work, Josh Jacobs, hammer the Moors because, I don't know, Jacobs is playing really well. And I feel like Green Bay knows if they have any shot to catch these teams. Remember, Green Bay still plays Minnesota. And Green Bay, if they win this game, they're a game behind Detroit. And they know that Detroit gets to go play, Minnesota and Buffalo the next couple of weeks. 9-3 right now, but they have a chance to win this division still. And if they lose this, it's over. They'll be a wild card team, and it is what it is. But I don't know. This is an interesting one, Mike. A very interesting week.
It's going to be a fun one. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the All 32 Pod. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson, thank you for watching, listening. Remember to subscribe, tell your friends, leave a review. We appreciate all of it. And we will talk to you again on Monday after Week 14 is in the books.